The dust swirled across the lonely road as Theodora Carson watched the stagecoach disappear into the hazy horizon, her heart sinking with the realization that she had been left behind in the most dangerous stretch of Arizona territory. The year was 1878, and Williams was nothing more than a dusty outpost nestled in the pines south of the Grand Canyon, beautiful but unforgiving, especially to a woman alone. "No, wait," Theodora shouted, her voice carried away by the relentless wind. Her valise sat beside her, containing everything she owned in the world. The brief stop for a broken wheel had turned disastrous when she'd stepped away to refresh herself behind a stand of juniper trees. The driver, clearly anxious about reports of the Hollow Creek gang operating in the area, had hurried the repair and departed without counting his passengers. The sun beat down mercilessly as Theodora shaded her eyes, scanning the barren landscape. Her simple blue traveling dress, once pristine when she'd left Boston, was now wrinkled and dust-coated from the arduous journey west. At 22, she had never imagined being stranded in such a precarious situation. Her teaching position in Williams awaited her, but it might as well have been on the moon. The sound of hoofbeats made her freeze. Slow, steady, approaching from the north. Theodora clutched her valise tightly, preparing to hide, when a tall figure on horseback emerged from a stand of ponderosa pines. The rider pulled up 20 yards away, studying her with wary blue eyes beneath the brim of a well-worn Stetson. His clothes were trail-worn but clean brown canvas pants, a faded blue shirt and leather vest. A Colt revolver hung at his side, but his hand made no move toward it. "Madam," he called, his voice deep and cautious, "you're a fair piece from anywhere safe." Theodora straightened her posture, trying to project confidence she didn't feel. "The stage left without me, sir. I was indisposed." The man nodded slowly, taking in her city clothes and proper speech. "This ain't friendly country to be stranded in. Hollow Creek boys have been hitting stages and homesteads all through this territory." "I've heard," she replied, her voice wavering slightly. "I'm meant to be in Williams by nightfall. I'm the new school teacher." Something shifted in his expression, a flicker of respect, perhaps. He nudged his horse closer, and she could see his face more clearly now. Weathered by sun and wind, but handsome in a rugged way, with a strong jaw shadowed by stubble, and those penetrating blue eyes that seemed to take her measure. "Vincent Eastwood," he said simply. "Most folks call me Vince." "Theodora Carson. Most folks call me Thea." She attempted a smile despite her predicament. He glanced down the empty road, then back to the mountains where shadows were growing longer. "Williams is still 20 miles southwest. Stage won't be back this way for 3 days." He paused, seeming to weigh his options before settling on a decision. "My horse carries 2. Thea blinked in surprise at the offer. "I couldn't possibly." "Madam Miss Carson, I don't mean to frighten you, but there's 3 possibilities out here. You can stay put and hope bandits don't find you before you die of thirst. You can try walking to Williams and likely meet the same fate, or you can trust a stranger who's offering help." Put that way, her options were indeed limited. Still, Thea hesitated. Back east, accepting a ride from an unknown man would be scandalous. Here, refusing might be fatal. "I have a small ranch 10 miles from here," Vince continued. "We can rest there tonight and I'll see you safely to Williams tomorrow." "How do I know you're not a bandit yourself, Mr. Eastwood?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. To her surprise, he laughed, a rich, genuine sound. "Fair question. I suppose you don't, but bandits generally don't waste time chatting when they could be robbing." He dismounted smoothly and approached, stopping a respectful distance away. "I give you my word as a man who was raised proper by his mama, I mean you no harm." There was something in his steady gaze that inspired trust, though Thea knew how foolish that might be. Still, what choice did she have? "Very well, Mr. Eastwood. I accept your offer of assistance." He nodded, lifting her valise with ease. "This all you got?" "Everything I own," she confirmed. Vincent secured her valise to his saddle, then turned to her. "Ever ridden before? Not since I was a child, and never like this." "It's simple enough. I'll mount first, then help you up behind me. You'll need to hold on." The process was less graceful than Thea would have liked. After 2 attempts, Vincent finally lifted her bodily from the ground and settled her behind him on the horse, a sturdy dun-colored gelding that seemed untroubled by the additional weight. "Hold tight to my waist," he instructed. Hesitantly, Thea placed her hands at his sides, trying to maintain some semblance of propriety. Vincent glanced over his shoulder with a raised eyebrow. "Miss Carson, this ain't a Sunday social. When I say hold tight, I mean it. One wrong move at a gallop could land you with a broken neck." Properly chastised, Thea slid her arms around his waist, feeling the solid warmth of him through his shirt. The impropriety of it made her cheeks burn, but she had little choice. "Better," he said, and nudged the horse into motion. They rode in silence for some time, the rhythm of the horse's gait gradually becoming more familiar. Thea found herself relaxing incrementally, though her arms remained firmly around Vincent's waist. The landscape rolled by dramatic red rocks, expanses of scrubby juniper and pine, occasional ravines that spoke of water in wetter seasons. "What brings a Boston lady to teach in Williams?" Vincent asked eventually, his voice carrying over his shoulder. Thea was surprised he'd placed her origin so accurately. "How did you know I'm from Boston? Your accent. Spent some time back east during the war." "Yes, well, I came west because I wanted something different." The simplification felt necessary, though it was only partially true. "Different is what you'll get, that's certain. Williams is growing, but it's still rough. Railroads coming through soon, they say." "Have you lived here long?" Vincent nodded. "Going on 8 years. Came west after Appomattox. Wasn't much left for me back in Virginia." "A Confederate soldier, then?" Thea considered this information carefully. Her father had fought for the Union, had been wounded at Antietam. Yet the war had been over for 13 years, and she was too far from home to cling to old divisions. "And now you ranch?" she asked. "Cattle and horses?" "Small operation, but it's mine." There was quiet pride in his voice. "Not rich, but not poor either." As they crested a small rise, Vincent suddenly pulled the horse to a stop, his body tensed beneath her hands. "Mr. Eastwood," she whispered, sensing his alarm. "Quiet," he murmured, slowly reaching for his rifle in its saddle scabbard. "We've got company." Following his gaze, Thea saw them 4 riders in the distance, moving perpendicular to their path. Even from this distance, something about them suggested danger. "Hollow Creek boys," Vincent muttered. "We need to move. Now." Before she could respond, he wheeled the horse and pushed it into a gallop, heading for a stand of trees to their right. Thea clung desperately to his waist as the ground flew beneath them, the horse's powerful muscles driving them forward at a speed that stole her breath. They reached the tree line just as shouts echoed behind them. Vincent didn't slow, weaving expertly through the ponderosa pines, ducking branches that threatened to unseat them both. "They've seen us," Thea cried. "Hold on." Vincent guided the horse down a steep embankment into a narrow ravine, where they splashed through a shallow creek before climbing the opposite side. The gelding responded to every subtle command, testament to both its training and Vincent's skill. The sounds of pursuit grew more distant, but Vincent maintained their pace, only occasionally glancing back. They rode hard for what felt like hours, but was likely only 20 minutes, following game trails and natural features that gradually led them away from their pursuers. Finally, Vincent slowed their pace, listening carefully. The forest around them was quiet save for birdsong and the rush of wind through the pines. "I think we lost them," he said, patting the horse's neck appreciatively. "Shadow here earned his oats today. Will they keep looking for us?" Thea asked, her voice unsteady from the harrowing ride. "Probably not. Too much effort for uncertain reward, but we'll take a different route to the ranch, just to be sure." He turned in the saddle to look at her. "You all right?" Thea nodded, though her heart still raced. "Yes, you ride very well." A hint of a smile crossed his face. "Necessity out here. You held on admirably for a city girl." They continued at a more reasonable pace, following a meandering path that Vincent assured her would lead to his ranch. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the trees, Thea found herself increasingly aware of the man whose waist she held. There was a strength to him that went beyond the physical, a quiet competence that inspired confidence. "There it is," Vincent said eventually, nodding toward a clearing ahead. Eastwood Ranch was modest but well-maintained, a main cabin built of sturdy logs with a pitched roof, a barn, corral, and several outbuildings. Smoke curled from the chimney, suggesting someone was home. "My ranch hand must have started supper," Vincent explained as they approached. "Fellow named Miguel. Good man." As they rode into the yard, a stocky man with a graying mustache emerged from the barn, his expression shifting from wariness to recognition. "Senor Vince, you return early." His eyes widened slightly at the sight of Thea. "And with company." Vincent dismounted smoothly, then reached up to help Thea down. Her legs felt wobbly after the long ride, and she stumbled slightly, her hands automatically gripping Vincent's shoulders to steady herself. For a moment, they stood close, too close for propriety, before she hastily stepped back. "Miguel, this is Miss Theodora Carson," Vincent said, seemingly unaffected by the moment. "She's the new school teacher for Williams, but her stage left without her. Miss Carson, Miguel Ortiz." Miguel tipped his hat respectfully. "Señorita, welcome to Eastwood Ranch." "Thank you," Thea replied, brushing dust from her skirts in a futile attempt to restore some dignity to her appearance. "The stage left her in Bandit country," Vincent added, his tone hardening. "We had a run-in with the Hollow Creek gang on the way back." Miguel's expression darkened. "They get closer every month. Sheriff does nothing." "Not much he can do with 3 deputies against 15 outlaws," Vincent replied, though his tone suggested he didn't entirely believe his own defense. He turned to Thea. "Let's get you inside. You must be exhausted." The interior of the cabin was surprisingly comfortable, simple but clean, with solid furniture that spoke of craftsmanship rather than luxury. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, while shelves of books lined another, an unexpected sight that immediately drew Thea's attention. "You're a reader," she observed with pleasure. Vincent looked almost embarrassed. "Keeps the mind sharp during winter months." Miguel busied himself at the stove, where a pot of something savory simmered. "I make stew," he announced. "Enough for 3. "I'll show you where you can freshen up," Vincent said, leading Thea to a small side room. "It's not much, but you'll have privacy. There's a basin and pitcher." "I'll have Miguel heat some water for you." "Thank you," Thea said sincerely. "For everything. I dread to think what might have happened if you hadn't come along." Something flickered in Vincent's eyes, concern perhaps, or something deeper. "No need for thanks. Anyone would have done the same." "We both know that's not true, Mr. Eastwood." He inclined his head slightly, accepting the point. "Get some rest. Supper will be ready soon." Alone in the small room, Thea took stock of her situation. In the space of a day, she had traveled from the relative civilization of Flagstaff to being stranded in the wilderness, pursued by bandits, and rescued by a handsome former Confederate soldier with an unexpected library. It was more adventure than she'd experienced in her entire life in Boston. As she washed the trail dust from her face and hands, she caught her reflection in a small mirror hanging on the wall. Her auburn hair had partially escaped its pins, her normally pale complexion was flushed from sun and wind, and her eyes, a deep green that her mother had always called her best feature, held a gleam of something new. Excitement, perhaps, or possibility. "What would you think of me now, Father?" she whispered to the empty room. The proper, dutiful daughter, alone in a strange man's home, miles from civilization. But strangely, she didn't feel afraid. For the first time since leaving Boston, Thea felt as though she might be exactly where she was meant to be. Supper was a simple but hearty affair: venison stew, cornbread, and strong coffee. Miguel proved to be an excellent cook, though conversation was limited by his broken English and Thea's non-existent Spanish. Vincent, however, moved easily between languages, translating when necessary and keeping the conversation flowing. "Miguel says the stage has been running late these past few weeks," Vincent explained. "Probably why the driver was in such a hurry he forgot to count heads." "Still inexcusable," Thea replied. "I paid for passage to Williams. Stage company will make it right, I expect. They can't afford a reputation for leaving passengers behind." Miguel said something in rapid Spanish that made Vincent chuckle. "What did he say?" Thea asked. Vincent's eyes twinkled. "He said maybe it was fate that brought you to Eastwood Ranch instead of Williams." Thea felt a blush rise to her cheeks. "Please tell Miguel I appreciate his romantic notion, but I have responsibilities awaiting me in Williams." After translating, Vincent added, "School doesn't start for 2 weeks yet. Town council sent word they're still finishing the schoolhouse." "You seem well informed about the school," Thea observed. Vincent shrugged. "Small territory, news travels. Besides, I've got some interest in education matters." Before she could question him further, Miguel rose and began clearing the dishes, waving away Thea's offer to help. "No, no, señorita. You are guest. I'll ride you into Williams tomorrow," Vincent said. "Should take about 3 hours at an easy pace." Thea nodded, feeling an unexpected twinge of disappointment that her time at the ranch would be so brief. "I appreciate that. I wouldn't want to impose any longer than necessary." "No imposition," he replied, his voice softening. "It's been pleasant having company besides Miguel. Man gets used to silence out here, but sometimes forgets what he's missing." Their eyes met across the table, and something unspoken passed between them, a moment of connection that transcended their brief acquaintance. Thea found herself wondering about this man who lived in isolation, yet maintained a library of classics, who spoke Spanish fluently and rode like he was born in the saddle. Miguel's voice broke the moment, saying something to Vincent that caused him to stand abruptly. "Miguel reminds me we need to check on a new foal," Vincent explained. "Excuse us for a few minutes." Left alone, Thea wandered to the bookshelves, running her fingers along the spines of volumes ranging from practical manuals on animal husbandry to poetry collections and novels. Shakespeare sat alongside Cervantes, Dickens beside Twain. These were not merely decorative books, many showed the wear of multiple readings. Outside, she could hear the murmur of men's voices as Vincent and Miguel conversed in the yard. Through the window, she watched them walk toward the barn, their silhouettes outlined against the twilight sky. There was something compelling about Vincent Eastwood, a quiet dignity that spoke of a man comfortable in his own skin, neither boastful nor apologetic about who he was. When the men returned, Miguel bid them good night and retired to his quarters in one of the outbuildings. Vincent stoked the fire, then turned to Thea with a slightly awkward expression. "About sleeping arrangements," he began. "You'll take my bed, of course. I'll sleep out here by the fire." "I couldn't possibly displace you." "You're not displacing anyone, Miss Carson. I've slept on harder ground than this floor plenty of times." His tone brooked no argument, so Thea simply nodded. "Then thank you. Again." Vincent showed her to his bedroom, a sparse but clean space with a solid wooden bed, dresser, and small table. A quilt in blues and browns covered the bed, handmade but not feminine. "There's water in the pitcher if you need it," he said, lingering in the doorway. "If you need anything else, just call out." "I will," she promised. Then, feeling suddenly bold, she added, "Mr. Eastwood, Vincent, I want you to know how truly grateful I am. You saved my life today." He looked momentarily startled by her use of his given name, then a small smile softened his features. "Get some rest, Theodora. Tomorrow's another day." Sleep came surprisingly easily in the unfamiliar bed, wrapped in quilts that carried the faint scent of pine and leather that she was already beginning to associate with Vincent. Thea dreamed of riding across open country, arms wrapped around a strong waist, the horizon endless before them. Morning brought the aroma of coffee and frying bacon. Thea dressed quickly in her spare outfit from the valise, a simple brown skirt, and cream shirtwaist that would have to suffice until she reached Williams and could properly unpack. She tried to tidy her hair as best she could without her usual array of pins and combs, settling for a simple braid. Vincent was alone in the main room, tending a pan of bacon on the cast iron stove. He looked up as she entered, his eyes widening slightly before he collected himself. "Morning," he said, nodding toward a pot of coffee. "Help yourself. Miguel's already out with the horses." "Thank you." Thea poured a cup, noticing how domestic the scene felt a dangerous thought she quickly suppressed. "Did you sleep well on the floor?" "Well enough." His wry smile suggested otherwise. They ate breakfast amid comfortable conversation, discussing the route they would take to Williams and what Thea might expect of the town. "It's growing fast," Vincent explained. "Railroad surveyors have been through, and where the railroad goes, civilization follows for better or worse." "You don't sound enthusiastic about progress," Thea observed. Vincent considered his response. "Progress brings good and bad. New markets for cattle, more conveniences. But also more people claiming land, fencing off what used to be open range, and sometimes the wrong sort of people. Like the Hollow Creek Gang, they're symptoms, not causes. Men turn to outlawing for all sorts of reasons, greed mostly, but sometimes desperation." He shook his head. "Sorry, didn't mean to lecture. Teacher's the one who should be doing that." "I don't mind," Thea said honestly. "I find your perspective interesting." Vincent looked as though he might say more, but Miguel entered, announcing that the horses were ready. "2 horses," he clarified with a grin. "Señorita rides better than expected." Thea laughed. "I'm not sure clinging desperately counts as riding, but I'll take the compliment." Vincent had saddled a gentle-looking bay mare for her. "This is Penny. She's steady and patient, good for a beginner." Under his guidance, Thea mounted more gracefully than the previous day, though she still felt awkward in her skirts. Vincent demonstrated the basics of controlling the horse, and they set off at an easy pace, Miguel waving them off with a knowing smile that made Thea wonder what he and Vincent had discussed in Spanish the night before. The morning was glorious, clear skies, moderate temperature, and scenery that took Thea's breath away. They rode through pine forests that occasionally opened to reveal dramatic vistas of distant mountains and red rock formations. "It's beautiful," Thea said as they paused atop a ridge. "So different from New England." "Beautiful but harsh," Vincent replied. "Land that makes you work for every reward." He pointed toward the southwest. "Williams is just beyond that next ridge, another hour's ride." Thea felt that same twinge of disappointment. So soon?" Vincent glanced at her, a question in his eyes. "Thought you were eager to reach your destination." "I am, of course, it's just—" She searched for words that wouldn't reveal too much. "I've enjoyed our conversations, as have I." He adjusted his hat, seemingly contemplating something. "Williams isn't that far from my ranch. 10, 12 miles as the crow flies. Is that an invitation to visit, Mr. Eastwood?" A smile played at the corners of his mouth. "Maybe it is, Miss Carson." They continued riding, the conversation turning to Thea's plans for the school. "I understand there will be about 20 children initially, ranging from 6 to 16 years of age," she explained. "A challenge, certainly, but I've prepared a curriculum that should accommodate various levels. Some of those older boys will be more interested in ranching than reading," Vincent warned. "Their families need hands on the farm." "Education isn't just about books," Thea replied. "It's about preparing children for whatever life they choose." Vincent looked impressed. "Not the usual schoolmarm philosophy." "I'm not the usual schoolmarm." The words came out more boldly than she intended. "No," he agreed quietly, "you certainly are not." As they approached Williams, the landscape gradually showed more signs of human presence: fenced pastures, occasional homesteads, and finally the town itself, nestled in a valley. It was larger than Thea had expected, perhaps 50 buildings, including several substantial structures along the main street. "Railroad survey came through last year," Vincent explained. "Town's been growing ever since. That's the new schoolhouse." He pointed to a freshly painted white building at the edge of town. People stopped to watch as they rode down the main street. A woman riding alongside a man was apparently noteworthy enough to draw attention. Vincent seemed oblivious to the stairs, guiding her toward a 2-story building with a sign proclaiming it the Grand Hotel. "Not actually grand by Eastern standards," he said with a smile, "but the best Williams has to offer. Town council arranged your lodging here until the teacherage is completed." They dismounted, and Vincent tied both horses to the hitching post before retrieving Thea's valise. As they climbed the steps to the hotel porch, the door opened to reveal a stout woman with iron gray hair pulled into a severe bun. "You must be Miss Carson," the woman exclaimed. "We were beside ourselves with worry when you weren't on yesterday's stage." "Mr. Thompson sent a telegram to Flagstaff this morning. Mrs. Whitfield, I presume?" Thea had corresponded with the woman as head of the school board. "I apologize for the concern. There was a misunderstanding with the stage." "The stage left without her," Vincent added, his tone making clear his opinion of the matter. "Found her stranded in Hollow Creek territory." Mrs. Whitfield's eyes widened. "Good heavens! How fortunate you came along, Mr. Eastwood." Her gaze darted between them, clearly calculating the propriety of the situation. "Very fortunate indeed," Thea agreed, hoping to diffuse any potential scandal. "Mr. Eastwood very kindly provided shelter for the night along with his ranch hand, Mr. Ortiz, and escorted me safely to Williams today." Mrs. Whitfield seemed somewhat mollified, though her pinched expression suggested reservations. "Well, the important thing is you've arrived safely. We've prepared your room, and the school board would like to meet with you tomorrow morning if that's convenient." "Of course," Thea replied. "I'm eager to begin preparations for the term." Vincent handed over her valise. "I should be going, Miss Carson." Town errands to run before heading back to the ranch. Something in his formal tone saddened Thea. The easy companionship of the trail seemed to be evaporating in the face of civilization and its expectations. "Thank you again for everything, Mr. Eastwood," she said, extending her hand. He took it briefly, his calloused palm warm against hers. "My pleasure, Miss Carson." Then, with a tip of his hat to both women, he turned and walked back to the horses. Mrs. Whitfield ushered Thea inside, already talking about the school board meeting and introductions to prominent town families. But Thea found herself glancing back through the window, watching Vincent's tall figure as he led both horses down the street toward the general store. The next 2 weeks passed in a flurry of activity as Thea settled into Williams. Her room at the Grand Hotel was simple but comfortable, and the townspeople were generally welcoming, if curious about the Eastern teacher. The school board, consisting of Mrs. Whitfield, Mr. Thompson the banker, and Dr. Fraser, provided her with a list of expected pupils and a modest budget for supplies. The schoolhouse itself was still being completed, with carpenters putting final touches on desks and bookshelves. Thea spent hours there each day, arranging her classroom and preparing lessons, determined to make a good impression when school officially began. Despite her busy schedule, she found her thoughts frequently turning to Vincent Eastwood. There had been no word from him since he'd left her at the hotel, though she'd scanned the streets hopefully whenever she ventured out. Pride prevented her from asking about him directly, though she gleaned bits of information through casual conversations. "Eastwood keeps mostly to himself," Mr. Graham at the general store told her when she mentioned meeting him. "Good man, though. Pays his bills on time, helps neighbors when needed. Fought for the Confederacy, I heard, but doesn't talk about it. He raids a lot," added Mrs. Graham, wrapping Thea's purchases in brown paper. "Orders books regular from back east." On Saturday of the second week, Thea was arranging books on the classroom shelves when the door opened, sending a shaft of sunlight across the wooden floor. She turned, expecting to see one of the carpenters, and instead found Vincent standing in the doorway, hat in hand. "Mr. Eastwood," she said, unable to keep the pleasure from her voice. "Miss Carson." He stepped inside, glancing around the classroom. "Place is coming along nicely." "Yes, it is," she agreed, setting down the book she'd been holding. "What brings you to Williams? Supply run," he replied, then added more hesitantly, "and thought I'd see how you were settling in." "Very well, thank you. Everyone has been most helpful." Vincent nodded, seeming uncharacteristically uncertain. "Good, that's good." He cleared his throat. "Actually, there was something specific I wanted to discuss with you." "Oh," Thea's heart quickened inexplicably. "Yes, there's a boy at my ranch, Miguel's nephew Pablo, 12 years old. His parents died of fever last winter in Sonora, and Miguel's raising him now." Vincent twisted his hat in his hands. "Smart kid, learns quick, but his English is limited and he needs proper schooling." "You want to enroll him in the school?" Thea asked, understanding dawning. "If that's acceptable. He'd ride in with Miguel when he comes to town for supplies, stay at the ranch on weekends. I'd pay the full fee, of course." "Of course he'd be welcome," Thea assured him. "Though I must warn you, my Spanish is non-existent." Vincent's expression lightened. "He needs to learn English anyway, and I could help with translations for schoolwork if needed." The offer seemed to suggest regular contact, which pleased Thea more than it should have. "That would be most helpful. Perhaps you could bring Pablo to meet me before school begins, to assess his current knowledge." "I could do that," Vincent agreed, a smile finally breaking through his reserve. "Tomorrow, perhaps, after church?" "That would be perfect." An awkward silence fell between them, filled with unspoken thoughts. Vincent finally broke it, gesturing toward the bookshelves. "Your collection is rather sparse." Thea sighed. "The budget only stretched so far. I've donated some of my own books, but we're still lacking in many areas." "I might have some to contribute," Vincent offered. "Duplicates mostly. And some that might be suitable for older students." "That would be wonderful," Thea exclaimed, then caught herself, moderating her enthusiasm. If you're certain you can spare them, I can. He hesitated, then added, maybe I could bring them by tomorrow as well. I look forward to it. Vincent settled his hat back on his head, nodding toward the door. I should let you get back to your preparations. Tomorrow, then. Tomorrow, Thea confirmed, watching as he walked out into the sunlight. After he'd gone, she pressed a hand to her cheek, feeling the warmth there. It was foolish to read too much into his visit. He was simply concerned about his employee's nephew, nothing more. Yet the thought of seeing him again tomorrow made her heart beat faster in a way that had nothing to do with professional interest. That night, lying in her hotel room, Thea tried to reason with herself. She had come west to start fresh, to build a respectable career away from the whispers and pitying glances that had followed her in Boston after her father's financial ruin and subsequent death. The last thing she needed was to develop feelings for a former Confederate soldier turned rancher, a man who, despite his unexpected refinement, inhabited a world entirely different from the one she'd known. Yet, when she finally drifted to sleep, it was Vincent's face she saw in her dreams. Sunday dawned clear and mild. Thea dressed carefully in her best dress, a dark green wool that complemented her eyes, and attended services at William's small church. She noticed Vincent immediately, seated toward the back with Miguel and a thin boy who must be Pablo. Vincent had cleaned up for the occasion, his usual trail clothes replaced by a dark suit that emphasized his broad shoulders. Their eyes met briefly during a hymn, and Thea quickly looked back at her hymnal, conscious of Mrs. Whitfield's sharp gaze from the adjacent pew. After the service, as congregants mingled outside, Vincent approached with the boy in tow. Pablo was small for 12, with solemn dark eyes and the same weathered complexion as his uncle. Miss Carson, Vincent greeted her formally, aware of the watching townspeople. May I present Pablo Ortiz? The boy bowed slightly. Buenos dias, Señorita Maestra, he said, then added carefully in English, I am pleased to meet you. I'm very pleased to meet you too, Pablo, Thea replied warmly. Are you excited about school? Vincent translated the question, and Pablo nodded vigorously, responding in Spanish. He says he wants to learn everything, Vincent translated, pride evident in his voice. Especially reading. He loves stories. Then we shall get along splendidly, Thea told the boy. To Vincent, she added, would you like to bring him to the schoolhouse now to assess his knowledge? I have some primers we could review. That was our plan, Vincent agreed. Miguel has errands in town. We'll meet him at the general store afterward. The four of them walked to the schoolhouse, attracting curious glances. Thea was aware that appearances mattered in a small town, but she kept her head high. There was nothing improper about consulting with a student's guardian before the term began. At the schoolhouse, Thea led Pablo through some basic exercises to gauge his knowledge. The boy was indeed bright, with a good grasp of basic arithmetic and the ability to read simple Spanish. His English vocabulary was limited but growing. Throughout the assessment, Vincent remained nearby, occasionally translating but mostly observing with evident pride. He's a quick learner, Thea told Vincent as Pablo examined the classroom's small globe. With regular attendance, he should advance rapidly. That's good to hear. Vincent's voice softened. Education's important. Opens doors that might otherwise stay closed. You speak from experience, he nodded. My father believed in education, even for a Virginia plantation owner's son expected to work the land. Sent me to university before the war changed everything. This glimpse into his past intrigued Thea. What did you study? Literature, primarily. Planned to teach, actually. A shadow crossed his face. War had other ideas. Before Thea could respond, Pablo approached with a question in Spanish. Vincent answered him, then explained to Thea. He wants to know if we have any books about explorers. He's fascinated by maps and far-off places. A boy after my own heart, Thea smiled. I have a copy of the Travels of Marco Polo that might interest him, though it's in English. Perfect opportunity to practice, Vincent replied. He turned to Pablo, explaining in Spanish, which earned an enthusiastic nod from the boy. I almost forgot, Vincent added, reaching into his satchel. Brought these for your library. He produced 5 books, 2 novels, a volume of poetry, an atlas, and a well-preserved copy of the Elements of Geometry. These are wonderful additions, Thea said, touched by the gesture. The older students will particularly benefit from the geometry text. Vincent looked pleased. Had a duplicate, thought it might be useful. As they prepared to leave, Pablo surprising both adults by asking Thea directly in careful English, "You visit ranch sometime?" Tio Miguel makes good tamales. Vincent looked slightly embarrassed. Pablo, I would love to visit sometime, Thea replied, smiling at the boy's directness. When my schedule permits. Outside the schoolhouse, they found Miguel waiting. After brief goodbyes, the 3 headed toward their horses, but Vincent paused, turning back. Miss Carson, he called. The town's having that harvest dance next Saturday. Would you, that is, might you consider attending with me? The invitation was unexpected but not unwelcome. I would be delighted, Mr. Eastwood, Thea replied, conscious of maintaining proper formality despite the flutter in her chest. Vincent's face brightened. I'll call for you at the hotel. 7 o'clock. 7 would be perfect. As Thea watched them ride out of town, she was too preoccupied to notice Mrs. Whitfield observing from the church steps, her expression calculating. The harvest dance was the main social event of the season in Williams, held in the large barn at the edge of town that doubled as a community gathering place. By Saturday evening, Thea had endured several casual inquiries from Mrs. Whitfield about her acquaintance with Vincent Eastwood, each loaded with unsubtle warnings about a teacher's need to maintain an impeccable reputation. Mr. Eastwood is a respected rancher. Thea had finally replied, keeping her tone even, and the guardian of one of my pupils. I see nothing inappropriate about accepting his invitation to a community event. Mrs. Whitfield had sniffed disapprovingly but made no further comment. At precisely 7 o'clock, Vincent arrived at the hotel. Thea had worried he might wear his trail clothes, but he appeared in the same dark suit he'd worn to church, with the addition of a bolo tie. He stopped short when she descended the stairs, his eyes widening at the sight of her in her best dress, a deep blue silk with modest lace trim, saved from her Boston days. Miss Carson, he said when he found his voice, you look beautiful. Thank you, Mr. Eastwood, she replied, pleased by his reaction. You're looking quite handsome yourself. The walk to the dance was filled with easy conversation, and Thea found herself relaxing in Vincent's company. The barn was festively decorated with autumn colors, lanterns hanging from the rafters, and a small band of local musicians tuning their instruments on a makeshift stage. Almost immediately, they were surrounded by curious townspeople eager to meet the new teacher and, Thea suspected, to assess her relationship with Vincent. He stayed close by her side, making introductions and smoothing over awkward moments with quiet humor. Everyone's staring, Thea murmured after their third conversation with people whose names she immediately forgot. Small towns, Vincent replied with a wry smile. Entertainment's limited, but don't worry, they'll find someone else to gossip about soon enough. The dancing began with a lively reel that had couples lining up in rows. Vincent led Thea onto the floor with surprising grace for a man who spent most of his time on horseback. You dance well, she observed as they circled each other. University education included some social graces, he replied, though I'm years out of practice. He was being modest. He moved with confidence and precision, guiding her through the patterns with a gentle hand at her waist or elbow. As the evening progressed through various dances, Thea found herself increasingly aware of those brief touches, each one sending a small thrill through her that had nothing to do with the exertion of dancing. During a break while the musicians refreshed themselves, Vincent brought her a cup of punch and they stepped outside for a moment of quiet. The night air was cool but not cold, stars brilliant in the clear sky above. "Enjoying yourself?" Vincent asked, his voice soft in the darkness. "Very much," she replied honestly. "Though I fear I've scandalized Mrs. Whitfield by dancing 3 consecutive sets with you," Vincent chuckled. "Mrs. Whitfield would be scandalized by a butterfly landing on her Bible. Don't let her concern you." "I can't afford to alienate the school board, Vincent." It was the first time she'd used his given name since their journey to Williams. He turned to face her, his expression serious in the faint light spilling from the barn. "Is that all you're concerned about? The school board?" Thea hesitated, knowing they were approaching dangerous territory. "My position here is precarious. I'm new, untested. A woman alone making her way in a place very different from where I was raised." "I understand that," he said quietly, "but you're not alone, not anymore." The simple statement hung between them, laden with meaning. Before Thea could respond, the music struck up again inside a slower waltz this time. "May I have this dance, Thea?" Vincent asked, offering his hand. The use of her familiar name, spoken in that low, gentle voice, dissolved her reservations. "Yes," she answered, placing her hand in his. "Yes, you may." The waltz brought them closer than the previous dances had required, his hand firm at her waist, hers resting on his shoulder. They moved in perfect synchrony, as though they'd danced together for years rather than hours. Around them, other couples turned and swayed, but Thea was aware only of Vincent, his steady gaze, the warmth of his hand through her dress, the faint scent of leather and pine that seemed to cling to him even in his Sunday best. "People are watching," she murmured, though she couldn't bring herself to care. "Let them," he replied simply. When the music ended, neither moved immediately, prolonging the moment until propriety demanded they step apart. The remainder of the evening passed in a pleasant blur, and all too soon the final dance was announced. As they walked back to the hotel under a canopy of stars, Vincent offered Thea his arm. She took it without hesitation, grateful for both the support and the closeness. "Pablo has been practicing his English all week," Vincent said as they approached the hotel. "He's determined to impress you on the first day of school." "He's a remarkable boy," Thea replied. "You and Miguel are doing a wonderful job with him." "We're trying. Boy deserves a chance at a good life." Vincent paused at the hotel steps, turning to face her. "I was thinking, perhaps you might visit the ranch next Sunday after church, see where Pablo lives, have dinner with us. Miguel's tamales really are excellent." The invitation was innocent enough on the surface, a teacher visiting a student's home, but Thea understood the deeper meaning. This wasn't just about Pablo. "I would like that very much," she answered. Vincent's smile in the lamplight made her heart skip. "Good, that's good." They stood there a moment longer, neither willing to end the evening. Finally, Vincent took her hand, raising it slowly to his lips in a gesture more suited to the ballrooms of Richmond than the frontier town of Williams. "Thank you for a wonderful evening, Thea," he said softly. "Thank you for asking me," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. With visible reluctance, Vincent released her hand and stepped back. "Good night." "Good night, Vincent." Thea watched from the hotel porch as he walked away, his tall figure gradually disappearing into the darkness. Only when he was gone did she enter the hotel, climbing the stairs to her room with a lightness in her step that had nothing to do with the evening's dancing and everything to do with the promise of Sunday. The first day of school arrived with all the excitement and chaos Thea had anticipated. 23 children of varying ages crowded into the schoolhouse, some eager, some nervous, a few clearly resentful of being there at all. Pablo sat in the second row, his face serious with concentration as Thea conducted the opening exercises. Throughout the day, she divided her attention between age groups, setting the older children to assist the younger ones when possible. Pablo struggled with some English instructions, but applied himself diligently, occasionally consulting a small notebook where he had written vocabulary words. By the final bell, Thea was exhausted but exhilarated. The first day had gone as well as could be expected, with only minor disruptions mostly from two teenage boys who clearly thought themselves too grown for schooling. As the children filed out, Pablo approached her desk. "Good day, teacher," he asked carefully in English. "Yes, Pablo, a very good day," she replied with a smile. "And your English is improving already," he beamed at the praise. "Senor Vince helps me practice every night." The image of Vincent patiently working with the boy on his English warmed Thea's heart. "That's wonderful. Please tell him I'm very impressed." Pablo nodded, then added shyly, "He says to tell you he looks forward to Sunday." "So do I, Pablo, very much." After the boy left to meet Miguel at the general store, Thea remained at her desk, reflecting on the day's events while organizing lessons for tomorrow. She was so absorbed in her work that she didn't hear the door open, only becoming aware of a presence when a shadow fell across her papers. Looking up, she expected to see the school board's Mrs. Whitfield for her promised observation of the first day. Instead, she found an unfamiliar man standing before her desk, tall and lean, with an unkempt beard and cold eyes that immediately put her on edge. "Can I help you, sir?" she asked, setting down her pen. "You're the new school teacher," he stated rather than asked, his gaze traveling over her in a way that made her want to shrink back. "Prettier than the last one." Thea straightened in her chair, maintaining a professional demeanor despite her discomfort. "I'm Miss Carson. Did you wish to discuss one of the pupils?" The man chuckled, a sound devoid of humor. "No pupils of mine here. Just curious about the woman Eastwood's been squiring around town." "Mr. Eastwood is the guardian of one of my students," Thea replied coolly, though her heart had begun to race. "If you'll excuse me, I have work to complete." Instead of leaving, the man stepped closer, placing both hands on her desk and leaning forward. "Name's Blackburn, Jed Blackburn. Me and Eastwood have history." "I fail to see how that concerns me, Mr. Blackburn." Thea began gathering her papers, determined to leave. "It concerns you plenty if you're keeping company with him," Blackburn replied, his voice hardening. "Man's got enemies. Wouldn't want a pretty little thing like you getting caught in the middle." The threat was thinly veiled but unmistakable. Thea stood, her legs steadier than she expected. "I believe our conversation is concluded, Mr. Blackburn. Please leave the schoolhouse." For a tense moment, she thought he might refuse. Then the outside door opened again, and Dr. Fraser's voice called, "Miss Carson, are you still here?" Relief flooded through her as the doctor appeared in the doorway, his expression shifting from friendly to concerned as he assessed the scene before him. "Everything all right, Miss Carson?" he asked, his gaze fixed on Blackburn. "Just fine, Doc," Blackburn answered before Thea could speak. "Was just introducing myself to our new teacher." He straightened, touching the brim of his hat in a mocking gesture. "Remember what I said, Miss Carson. Choose your friends carefully in these parts. With that, he brushed past Dr. Fraser and out the door. "Are you all right, Doctor?" Fraser asked once Blackburn was gone. "That man's trouble. Runs with the Hollow Creek gang, though no one's been able to prove it." "I'm fine," Thea assured him, though her hands trembled slightly as she resumed packing her satchel. "He was unpleasant but made no direct threats, Doctor." Fraser looked skeptical. "Still, perhaps I should walk you back to the hotel, and you might want to mention this to Sheriff Donovan." Thea agreed to both suggestions, though she debated whether to tell Vincent about the encounter. The last thing she wanted was to cause conflict, especially if this Blackburn truly had some grievance against him. Yet as they walked back to the hotel, Dr. Fraser filled in some details that made her decision clearer. "Blackburn used to run cattle on land adjacent to Eastwood's," he explained. "Got caught rustling from several ranches, including Eastwood's. Vincent testified against him, and Blackburn did 2 years in territorial prison. Got out last spring and fell in with the Hollow Creek gang almost immediately. And now he's threatening me to get at Vincent," Thea concluded. "Seems likely. Blackburn's not one to forget a grudge." Dr. Fraser patted her arm reassuringly. "Don't worry too much. Sheriff will keep an eye on him when he's in town, and Eastwood can handle himself." That evening, after reporting the incident to Sheriff Donovan, who promised to have a word with Blackburn, Thea wrote a careful note to Vincent, explaining what had happened. She gave it to Miguel when he brought Pablo to school the next morning, and by afternoon had received a response. "Concerned about this development. We'll discuss when you visit Sunday. Please be careful and alert Sheriff if Blackburn appears again. V.E." The brief message carried an undercurrent of worry that both touched and troubled Thea. She had come west seeking independence and a fresh start, not to become entangled in frontier feuds. Yet she couldn't deny that her connection to Vincent had already grown too significant to sever, regardless of complications. Sunday couldn't arrive quickly enough. After church, where Vincent sat with Pablo and Miguel as usual, he approached her with a concerned expression. "No further trouble?" he asked quietly as they walked toward where his wagon waited. "None," Thea assured him. "Sheriff Donovan spoke with Mr. Blackburn, and I haven't seen him since." Vincent's jaw tightened. "Blackburn's not one to be deterred by a sheriff's warning, but let's not let him spoil our day." The ride to Eastwood Ranch took just over an hour, during which Pablo entertained Thea with stories about the animals, especially a new litter of kittens in the barn that he was helping to care for. Vincent remained somewhat preoccupied, though he made efforts to join the conversation, pointing out landmarks and sharing brief anecdotes about the area. Arriving at the ranch, Thea was struck again by its simple beauty, the well-maintained buildings nestled among pines, with mountains rising dramatically in the background. In daylight, she could better appreciate the thoughtful layout and the subtle touches that made it a home rather than merely a place of business. Miguel had clearly been preparing for their visit. Delicious aromas wafted from the cabin, and the table was set with what appeared to be the ranch's best dinnerware, mismatched but clean and carefully arranged. "I hope you're hungry," Vincent said as he helped her down from the wagon. "Miguel's been cooking since dawn." "Starving," Thea replied truthfully. "Something smells wonderful." The meal was indeed magnificent: spicy tamales, tender beef, beans seasoned with chilies, and fresh tortillas. Conversation flowed easily, with Pablo proudly serving as translator when Miguel's English failed him. The tension that had marked Vincent's expression in town gradually eased, and by the time they'd finished the apple pie Miguel had somehow managed to bake in his cast-iron stove, he seemed fully relaxed. After the meal, Pablo eagerly offered to show Thea the kittens, leading her to the barn while Vincent and Miguel cleaned up. The boy's pride in the ranch was evident as he pointed out features along the way: the new fence Vincent had built in the spring, the vegetable garden Miguel tended, the corral where they broke horses. In the cool dimness of the barn, Pablo led her to a stall where a gray tabby cat nestled with 5 kittens, their eyes recently opened to the world. "They are 2 weeks old," Pablo explained, carefully picking up a small black kitten and holding it for Thea to pet. "Senor Vince says I can keep one when they are bigger. Which will you choose?" Thea asked, stroking the tiny creature's soft fur. Pablo pointed to a striped kitten slightly larger than its siblings. "That one. He is brave, explores more than the others." "A good choice for a brave boy," Thea said, smiling as Pablo carefully returned the black kitten to its mother. "Miss Thea," Pablo said suddenly, his expression serious, "are you going to marry Senor Vince?" The question caught her completely off guard. "Pablo, we're just friends." The boy looked skeptical. "Tio Miguel says Senor Vince looks at you like the sun rises in your smile." His careful English suggested he'd memorized the phrase. Heat rushed to Thea's cheeks. "Miguel shouldn't say such things, especially to you." "But it would be good if you married him," Pablo persisted. "He is lonely, and you make him laugh." Before Thea could formulate a response to this startling assessment, Vincent's voice called from the barn doorway. "Pablo, are you talking Miss Carson's ear off about those kittens?" "No, Senor Vince," Pablo called back, exchanging a conspiratorial look with Thea. "We talk about important things." Vincent appeared at the stall door, raising an eyebrow at Thea's flushed face. "Important things, H.M. Should I be worried?" "Not at all," Thea assured him, hoping her composure had returned. Pablo was just sharing his wisdom about cats. Vincent didn't look entirely convinced but didn't press the issue. "Miguel's putting coffee on, and Pablo has chores to finish before evening, don't you?" With obvious reluctance, Pablo bid goodbye to the kittens and headed off to his duties, leaving Thea and Vincent alone in the quiet barn. "He's a remarkable child," Thea said, watching the boy go. "You and Miguel have given him a wonderful home." "We're trying," Vincent replied. "Boys had enough loss for a lifetime." He offered his arm. "Shall we walk a bit before coffee? There's a view I'd like to show you." They strolled away from the buildings, following a path that wound up a gentle slope through pines and junipers. Neither spoke immediately. Content in the comfortable silence broken only by birdsong and the whisper of wind through needles. At the crest of the hill, Vincent stopped. Before them, the land fell away into a valley framed by distant mountains, their peaks still bearing traces of last winter's snow. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the landscape, painting it in gold and amber. "It's breathtaking," Thea said softly. "This is why I stayed," Vincent told her, his voice equally quiet. "After the war, I drifted west with no particular destination in mind. Just needed to be away from Virginia and the memories there. But when I saw this valley, something settled in me, felt like I'd found where I belonged." "I understand that feeling," Thea replied. "Or at least, I'm beginning to." Vincent turned to face her, his expression earnest. "Thea, about Blackburn. I need you to understand that his grudge is dangerous. It's not just about the rustling conviction. He blames me for his brother's death during the trial. His brother, Matt Blackburn, tried to break Jed out of jail before sentencing, shot a deputy in the process. Sheriff returned fire." Vincent's eyes were troubled. "Jed swore revenge on everyone involved: judge, sheriff, witnesses, including me." Thea's stomach tightened with fear, not for herself but for Vincent. "Have there been attempts?" "Nothing direct. Some cattle missing, a fence cut." "Nothing I can prove was him." Vincent's jaw set in a hard line. "But now he's threatening you, and that I won't tolerate." "I don't want you putting yourself at risk because of me," Thea protested. Perhaps we should be more circumspect about our association." Vincent's expression softened as he took her hands in his. "Is that what you want? To step back from whatever this is growing between us?" Thea looked down at their joined hands, then back up to his face, earnest, weathered, dear to her in a way she hadn't believed possible so quickly. "No," she admitted quietly. "That's not what I want at all." "Good," he murmured, drawing her closer. "Because I've been wanting to do this since the dance." His kiss was gentle at first, a question rather than a demand. When Thea responded, sliding her hands up to his shoulders, he deepened the kiss, one arm circling her waist to draw her against him. Time seemed suspended in that moment, the breeze, the distant mountains, the approaching evening all fading to insignificance compared to the wonder of being in Vincent's arms. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Vincent rested his forehead against hers. "I'm falling in love with you, Theodora Carson," he said simply. "Probably have been since I found you stranded by that stage." "I think I've been falling too," she confessed, "though I've been trying very hard not to." That made him chuckle. "Why's that?" "Because it's completely impractical. I've only just begun establishing myself here. The school board already has reservations about my association with you, and now there's this situation with Blackburn." "All valid concerns," Vincent acknowledged. "Yet here we are." "Here we are," she agreed, unable to suppress a smile despite her worries. They walked back to the cabin hand in hand, both aware that they had crossed a threshold from which there was no easy return. Miguel, wise enough not to comment on their extended absence, served coffee and more pie, while Pablo chattered about school and kittens until it was time for Thea to return to town. The ride back was quieter, Pablo having elected to stay at the ranch with Miguel. Under the blanket Vincent had spread across their laps against the evening chill, their hands remained clasped, a silent affirmation of the feelings they had acknowledged on the hilltop. "I'll speak with Sheriff Donovan tomorrow," Vincent said as Williams came into view. "See what he knows about Blackburn's recent movements. Please be careful," Thea urged. "I couldn't bear it if something happened to you because of me." Vincent squeezed her hand reassuringly. "I'm always careful, and this isn't because of you, it's because of Blackburn's own bitterness. Don't take that burden on yourself." At the hotel, Vincent helped her down from the wagon, holding her hands a moment longer than necessary. "Thank you for coming today," he said softly. "It meant a lot to Pablo and to me." "Thank you for inviting me," she replied. "It was wonderful." He glanced around the quiet street, then quickly leaned down to brush his lips against hers. "Good night, Thea. Sweet dreams." "Good night, Vincent." As he drove away, Thea touched her fingers to her lips, still feeling the warmth of his kiss. Whatever complications lay ahead, one thing was certain: Vincent Eastwood had claimed a place in her heart that no one else had ever occupied. The following weeks established a pattern that, while challenging under the circumstances, brought joy to both Thea and Vincent. She dedicated herself to her teaching, winning over even the most reluctant students with her passion and creativity. Pablo flourished under her guidance, his English improving rapidly and his natural intelligence finding outlet in the schoolroom challenges. Vincent rode into town 2 or 3 times a week, ostensibly on ranch business but inevitably finding reasons to stop by the schoolhouse after hours. These visits were brief, but precious, sometimes just long enough to exchange news and perhaps a stolen kiss when they were certain no one was watching. On Sundays, Thea would accompany him back to the ranch after church, spending the afternoon in the company of what was beginning to feel like a family. Miguel's initial formality had given way to grandfatherly affection, especially after Thea began helping Pablo with his reading in the evenings before returning to town. The school board, particularly Mrs. Whitfield maintained their reservations about the relationship, but even they couldn't deny that Thea was proving to be an excellent teacher. When the first month's examinations showed marked improvement among most students, even Mrs. Whitfield grudgingly acknowledged Thea's competence. But beneath this veneer of normality, tension simmered. Blackburn had not returned to the schoolhouse, but there were reports of him in town, watching from a distance. Sheriff Donovan increased his patrols, but admitted privately to Vincent that he lacked the manpower to properly address the Hollow Creek gang's growing boldness. "They hit the Henderson place last week," Donovan told Vincent one afternoon as they stood outside the sheriff's office. "Took 20 head of cattle and left old man Henderson with a broken arm when he tried to stop them." "How many were there?" Vincent asked. "Henderson says at least 6. Blackburn was leading them, clear as day." Donovan shook his head. "I telegraphed for territorial marshals, but they're stretched thin with Indian troubles up north. Could be weeks before they send someone." "And meanwhile, Blackburn gets bolder," Vincent concluded grimly. The sheriff glanced toward the schoolhouse visible at the end of the street. "You're careful riding with Miss Carson, I hope. Never the same route twice, of course." Vincent had been taking such precautions from the beginning, ever since Blackburn's threat. "But I can't be with her all the time." "I've asked Deputy Lewis to keep special watch on the schoolhouse," Donovan assured him. "And Mrs. Whitfield's husband walks her home most days." It was a small comfort, but Vincent accepted it with a nod. "Appreciate that, Sheriff." As October gave way to November, the weather turned sharply colder. The first snow dusted the mountains, a reminder that winter would soon close many of the passes. Vincent found himself increasingly concerned about Thea remaining in the hotel, which was drafty and expensive, while the promised teacherage remained unfinished due to supply delays. "You could stay at the ranch," he suggested one Sunday as they walked the now familiar path to the hilltop. "The spare room is small but comfortable," Thea laughed softly. "And what would Mrs. Whitfield say to that arrangement? I'd be dismissed before nightfall." "We could get married," Vincent said, the words emerging before he'd fully formed the thought. Thea stopped walking, turning to face him with wide eyes. "Vincent, I know it's sudden," he continued, taking her hands in his, "and maybe not the most romantic proposal, but I love you, Thea. I think I have since I found you stranded by that stage. These past weeks have only confirmed what I already knew." "I love you too," she said softly. "But marriage? We've known each other barely 2 months." "Long enough to know what matters," Vincent replied. "Your courage, your kindness, your patience with Pablo, the way you stand up to Mrs. Whitfield when she's being unreasonable. How you look first thing in the morning when we have breakfast after you've stayed over." That last reference to the 2 occasions when bad weather had forced Thea to spend the night at the ranch, properly chaperoned by Miguel's presence, brought a blush to her cheeks. "Those are all lovely things to say," she acknowledged. "But marriage is a serious commitment, especially out here where divorce is nearly impossible." "I'm not looking for an escape clause," Vincent said, his voice gentle but firm. "I'm looking for a partner, someone to build a life with. I believe that someone is you." Thea gazed up at him, her heart full. The logical part of her mind insisted this was too fast, too soon. But her heart recognized the truth of his words and of her own feelings. In the brief time they'd known each other, Vincent had become essential to her happiness in a way no one else ever had. "Yes," she said finally, a smile breaking through her serious expression. "Yes, I will marry you, Vincent Eastwood." His answering smile was brilliant as he gathered her into his arms, lifting her briefly off her feet in his enthusiasm. When he set her down, he reached into his pocket and produced a small velvet pouch. "I've been carrying this for 2 weeks," he admitted, opening the pouch to reveal a simple gold band set with a small but perfect sapphire. "It was my mother's. I had Mr. Graham clean and resize it when I was last in town." As Vincent slid the ring onto her finger, Thea felt tears of happiness gather in her eyes. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Not as beautiful as you," he replied, kissing her gently. They decided to marry before Christmas, giving them just over a month for preparations. The announcement was met with mixed reactions in William's genuine congratulations, from many thinly veiled disapproval from Mrs. Whitfield and her circle, and wholehearted celebration from Pablo and Miguel. "I knew it," Pablo exclaimed when they told him. "I told Tio Miguel you would marry Señor Vince." "So you did," Thea agreed, laughing as the boy danced around the cabin in excitement. Miguel embraced her warmly, murmuring something in Spanish that made Vincent smile. "He says you've already been family in his heart," Vincent translated. "Now it will just be official." Plans proceeded rapidly. Thea would continue teaching through the end of the fall term, then move permanently to the ranch over the Christmas break. They would marry in the Williams Church with Reverend Johnson officiating, followed by a reception at the hotel. Simple, straightforward, and perfect for them both. But as the wedding day approached, the shadow of Blackburn and the Hollow Creek gang grew darker. Reports came of increasingly bold raids on outlying ranches, always led by Blackburn himself. Sheriff Donovan organized a citizens' committee for defense, which Vincent joined despite Thea's concerns. "I can't stand aside while our neighbors are threatened," he explained gently. "But I promise to be careful. We're focusing on prevention, not confrontation." Thea understood his sense of duty, though it did nothing to ease her worry. Each time he rode patrol with the Citizens Committee, she found herself watching the road anxiously until he returned safely. A week before the wedding, disaster struck. Vincent had ridden to a neighboring ranch to help reinforce defenses, expecting to return by nightfall. When midnight came with no sign of him, Thea, who had been staying at the ranch to help with wedding preparations, paced the cabin floor in growing fear. "He is fine," Miguel assured her, though his own expression betrayed concern. "Perhaps they had more work than expected. He will stay over." "He would have sent word," Thea replied, certain something was wrong. By dawn, her fears were confirmed when one of the Citizens Committee riders arrived, exhausted and grim-faced. "Hollow Creek hit the Peterson place last night," he reported between gulps of the coffee Miguel pressed into his hands. "They were waiting for us. Ambush." Thea's heart seemed to stop. "Vincent, is he alive?" the rider assured her quickly. "But shot. Doc Fraser's tending him in town." "I need to go to him," Thea said immediately, already reaching for her coat. "I'll saddle the horses," Miguel replied, equally determined. Pablo, awakened by the commotion, insisted on coming along, his young face tight with worry for the man who had become a father figure to him. The ride to Williams was the longest of Thea's life, each minute stretching endlessly as she imagined Vincent fighting for his life without her beside him. When they finally reached Dr. Fraser's office, she practically fell from the saddle in her haste to enter. "Where is he? How is he?" she demanded of the startled nurse who met her at the door. "Through there," the woman replied, pointing to a closed door. "Doctor's just finished surgery." Without waiting for permission, Thea pushed through the door, Miguel and Pablo close behind her. The room was small, dominated by a narrow bed where Vincent lay unnaturally still, his face pale beneath his tan. Dr. Fraser stood nearby, washing his hands in a basin of pinkish water. "Miss Carson," he acknowledged, unsurprised by her arrival. "He's stable. Bullet went through his shoulder, missed anything vital, but he lost a fair amount of blood." "Will he recover?" Thea asked, moving to Vincent's bedside and taking his limp hand in hers. "With proper care and no infection, yes," the doctor replied. "He's young and strong, but he'll need time to heal." As if sensing her presence, Vincent's eyelids fluttered open. "Thea," he murmured, his voice barely audible. "I'm here," she assured him, squeezing his hand gently. "We're all here, Miguel and Pablo too." Relief washed over his features. "Didn't want you to worry." "Too late for that," she replied, managing a watery smile. "But you're going to be fine, and that's all that matters." Over the following days, Vincent's condition gradually improved. Thea split her time between teaching and nursing, while Miguel and Pablo handled ranch duties with help from neighboring ranchers. The wedding was postponed indefinitely, though Thea scarcely gave it a thought. Her only concern was Vincent's recovery. Sheriff Donovan increased patrols around both the ranch and the town, but the Hollow Creek gang had gone to ground after the ambush. Rumor had it they were hiding in the mountains, perhaps planning a larger attack once the vigilance died down. "It was Blackburn who shot me," Vincent told Thea and the sheriff during a quiet conversation in his sick room. "Recognized his voice giving orders, called me out by name before he fired. This has become personal for him," Donovan concluded grimly, "which makes him even more dangerous." "I want you and Pablo staying in town until this is resolved," Vincent told Thea. "It's not safe at the ranch." "I'm not leaving you," she replied firmly. "I'll be staying here until Doc Fraser releases me anyway," Vincent pointed out. "Miguel can manage the ranch with help. Please, Thea. I can't recover properly if I'm worrying about you and Pablo." Put that way, she couldn't refuse. Arrangements were made for Pablo to stay with the Grahams at the general store, where their son was a school friend of his. Thea returned to her room at the hotel, though she spent most of her free hours at Vincent's bedside. 2 weeks after the shooting, Dr. Fraser finally declared Vincent well enough to be moved. "But not all the way to the ranch," he cautioned. "Too far if complications develop. He needs to stay in town for at least another week." The solution came from an unexpected quarter. Mrs. Whitfield, who had been notably silent since Vincent's injury, appeared at the doctor's office with her husband. "We have a spare room in our home," she announced to Thea. "Mr. Eastwood is welcome to recover there, and you may visit during appropriate hours." The offer stunned Thea, who had expected nothing but continued disapproval from the woman. "That's very kind, Mrs. Whitfield. But why my husband was at the Peterson place that night, Mrs." Whitfield explained, her usual stiffness softened by genuine emotion. "Mr. Eastwood pushed him out of the line of fire, took the bullet meant for William." She glanced at her husband, who nodded confirmation. "I may have misjudged his character." And so Vincent was installed in the Whitfields' comfortable guest room, with Thea visiting daily after school. His recovery accelerated in these more pleasant surroundings, and by early December, he was able to move about with the aid of a sling and occasional support. "We should reschedule the wedding," he told Thea one afternoon as they sat in the Whitfields' parlor enjoying a rare moment alone. "Christmas Eve, perhaps. I'll be fully recovered by then." "Are you certain?" Thea asked. "There's no rush." Vincent took her hand, his expression earnest. "I've faced death before, but never with so much to lose. It clarified things. I don't want to wait any longer to make you my wife." How could she resist such a declaration? Plans resumed, with even Mrs. Whitfield joining enthusiastically in the preparations. The ranch house was readied for Thea's arrival after the wedding, with Miguel overseeing repairs to make it more suitable for a lady's comfort. But the shadow of Blackburn still hung over them. Though there had been no further raids since the ambush, Sheriff Donovan remained convinced the Hollow Creek gang was planning something significant. "They've been gathering supplies," he told Vincent during one of his regular visits. "Ammunition, food stocks. like they're preparing for a siege or a major raid. "The stage," Vincent said suddenly. "The holiday stage will be carrying the miners' payroll from Flagstaff. When is it due?" "December 23rd, Donovan replied, his expression darkening with realization. "Day before your wedding. Carrying twice the usual cash for Christmas bonuses." "That has to be their target," Vincent concluded. "We need to prepare." Despite Thea's objections, Vincent insisted on joining the defense plans. His arm was healing well and his experience was valuable. "I won't engage directly," he promised her. "Just help with strategy." The plan they developed was straightforward: a show of force along the stage route, with armed men stationed at vulnerable points. If the gang appeared, they would find themselves outgunned and surrounded. "It's our best chance to end this threat for good," Sheriff Donovan told the assembled volunteers. "But it will only work if we maintain the element of surprise." The 23rd dawned clear and cold, with a fresh dusting of snow that turned the landscape into a glittering wonderland. Thea tried to focus on her teaching, but her mind kept returning to Vincent and the others positioned along the stage route. The children, sensing her distraction, were unusually subdued, even Pablo working quietly on his assignments without his usual stream of questions. When the school day finally ended, Thea found herself unable to settle. She had planned to finish packing her belongings for the move to the ranch, but anxiety drove her instead to the sheriff's office, seeking news. Deputy Lewis was manning the desk, his expression troubled. "No word yet, Miss Carson. Stage is due in another hour or so." "Where are they waiting for it?" she asked. The deputy hesitated, clearly reluctant to provide details. "Miss Carson, I don't think the sheriff would want me to, please," Thea interrupted. "I need to know." Perhaps it was the genuine fear in her voice, or simply sympathy for her situation, but Deputy Lewis relented. "They're at Coyote Pass, about 5 miles east. It's the most likely spot for an ambush, narrow trail, good cover for bandits." Thea knew the place. She and Vincent had passed it on their rides to and from the ranch. "Thank you," she said, already turning toward the door. "Miss Carson," the deputy called after her. "You're not thinking of going out there, are you? Sheriff was very clear that civilians should stay in town." "Of course not," Thea assured him with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'll wait here for news." But as soon as she left the sheriff's office, Thea headed directly to the livery stable. She had no intention of riding into danger, but neither could she simply wait in town, imagining the worst. She would ride to the edge of the pass, she decided, just close enough to see what was happening without endangering herself. The stable owner was reluctant to rent her a horse, especially when he learned her destination, but eventually relented when she claimed she was delivering an urgent message from Deputy Lewis. It was the first time Thea had deliberately lied, and she felt a pang of guilt even as she saddled the gentle mare the stableman recommended. The ride east was uneventful, the snow-covered trail easy to follow. Thea kept to a steady pace, her determination overriding her limited riding experience. As she approached Coyote Pass, she slowed, looking for signs of the sheriff's men. The pass itself was a narrow defile between two rocky ridges, the trail winding through it barely wide enough for a wagon. Thea dismounted at the western entrance, tethering her horse to a juniper tree before proceeding cautiously on foot. She had just reached a vantage point overlooking the pass when the sound of gunfire erupted from the eastern end. Dropping to her knees behind a boulder, Thea watched in horror as the scene unfolded below. The stage had entered the pass from the east, only to be confronted by mounted men blocking the trail. But before the apparent ambush could proceed, gunfire erupted from the ridges on both sides. The sheriff's men, positioned to catch the gang in a crossfire. The plan might have worked perfectly had one element not gone awry. As shots were exchanged, the stage driver was hit, losing control of the team. The stage careened off the trail, crashing against the base of the ridge directly below Thea's position. In the chaos that followed, Thea saw a figure she recognized immediately: Vincent, moving with surprising agility despite his healing wound, working his way down toward the crashed stage. His purpose was clear: passengers might be injured, needing help, but another figure had spotted him too. Jed Blackburn, recognizable by his distinctive duster even at this distance, was breaking away from the main fight, heading directly toward Vincent with rifle raised. Without conscious thought, Thea found herself scrambling down the slope, stones and loose earth sliding beneath her feet. "Vincent!" she screamed. "Behind you!" Her warning came just in time. Vincent whirled, drawing his revolver as Blackburn fired. The shot went wide, and Vincent dove for cover behind a boulder as Blackburn advanced, working the lever of his Winchester. Thea continued her descent, no longer thinking of her own safety. She had to reach Vincent, had to help somehow. As she neared the bottom of the slope, her foot slipped on a patch of ice, sending her tumbling the final few yards. The fall saved her life. Blackburn, alerted by the noise, turned and fired at the movement, the bullet passing through the space where she would have been standing. Before he could chamber another round, Vincent emerged from cover, his revolver steady despite his injury. "Drop it, Blackburn," he commanded. "It's over." "Your men are surrounded." Blackburn's face contorted with hatred. "Not before I finish what I started, Eastwood." His eyes flickered to Thea, who was struggling to her feet. "And maybe I'll take your woman too, for good measure." He swung the rifle toward Thea, but Vincent was faster. 2 shots rang out, the sound echoing through the pass. Blackburn staggered, a look of surprise replacing the hatred on his face. Then he fell, the Winchester dropping unfired from his hands. "Thea!" Vincent was at her side in an instant, his face pale with fear and anger. "What in God's name are you doing here?" "I couldn't stay away," she confessed, clinging to him. "I was so afraid. You could have been killed." His voice broke on the last word, and he pulled her against him, his good arm tight around her. "If anything happened to you." Their reunion was interrupted by Sheriff Donovan's arrival, his expression a mixture of relief and exasperation. "Miss Carson, should have known you'd be in the middle of this. Everyone all right?" "We're fine," Vincent answered, still holding Thea close. "Blackburn?" "Dead," Donovan confirmed after a quick check. 2 others as well. Rest are surrendering. He glanced toward the crashed stagecoach. Drivers wounded but alive, passengers shaken but no serious injuries. The aftermath was a blur of activity: wounded tended to, prisoners secured, statements taken. Through it all, Vincent refused to leave Thea's side, as if afraid she might disappear or throw herself into danger again if he looked away. By the time they returned to Williams, darkness had fallen. The town was alight with excitement, the news of the Hollow Creek gang's defeat spreading rapidly. Deputy Lewis had organized a group of townspeople to prepare hot food and coffee for the returning men, turning the confrontation's end into an impromptu celebration. "You're both staying with us tonight," Mrs. Whitfield declared when she found Thea and Vincent among the crowd. "No arguments. You look dead on your feet, and there's a wedding to prepare for tomorrow." The reminder of their wedding, somehow lost in the day's drama, brought smiles to both their faces. They had survived not just this day, but all the challenges thrown at them since that fateful moment when a stage left without her, and a cowboy said his horse carried 2. "Still want to marry me tomorrow?" Vincent asked quietly as they followed Mrs. Whitfield toward her home. "Even knowing life with me might never be entirely peaceful." Thea slipped her hand into his, the engagement ring catching the lamplight. "More than ever," she assured him, "though I would appreciate somewhat less excitement in our first year of marriage." His laugh, warm and genuine, was the perfect end to a day that had contained more fear and courage than most people experience in a lifetime. The wedding on Christmas Eve was everything they had hoped for: simple, meaningful, and attended by everyone who had come to matter in their shared life. Pablo stood proudly as Vincent's best man, while Mrs. Whitfield, in a surprising turn, served as Thea's matron of honor. As Reverend Johnson pronounced them husband and wife, Thea looked into Vincent's eyes and saw the future unfolding before them, a future built on the foundation of that chance meeting on a dusty road. There would be challenges ahead, certainly. Life in the Arizona Territory was never easy. But they would face those challenges together, their love forged in adversity and all the stronger for it. 5 years later, Thea stood on the hilltop that had become their special place, watching as Vincent taught their 3-year-old son Thomas to ride his first pony. Pablo, now 17 and nearly a man, stood nearby, ready to assist if needed, though his attention frequently strayed to the book tucked in his back pocket, a sign of his continuing education that filled Thea with pride. The ranch had prospered under their joint care. The original cabin had been expanded into a proper home, and their herd had grown to be one of the finest in the territory. Thea still taught at the Williams School 3 days a week, having trained an assistant to handle the other days. The railroad had indeed come through, bringing growth and opportunity to the town, though Vincent sometimes grumbled good-naturedly about the increased noise and traffic. As if sensing her gaze, Vincent looked up from his patient instruction, offering her the same smile that had first won her heart. Beside him, Thomas waved excitedly, calling, "Look, Mama, I'm riding." "I see you, sweetheart," she called back. "You're doing wonderfully." Her hand rested on her slightly rounded belly where their second child was just beginning to make its presence known. Another blessing in a life that had become richer than she could have imagined that day when the stage left without her in Bandit country, and a cowboy said his horse carried 2. Miguel approached, carrying their 1-year-old daughter Elena, who reached for her mother with a delighted squeal. Taking the child into her arms, Thea thanked Miguel, who beamed with grandfatherly pride at the children he considered family in all but blood. As the sun began its descent toward the distant mountains, painting the landscape in gold and amber, Vincent brought Thomas up to join them, dismounting from his own horse to stand beside his wife. "Happy?" he asked softly, his arm slipping around her waist. Thea leaned into his embrace, surrounded by the family they had built together. "Completely," she replied, and knew it was the simple truth. The stage that had left her behind had actually set her on the path to everything she never knew she wanted: a home, a family, a love that had only deepened with each passing year. As they walked back toward the house together, Thea sent a silent thanks to whatever fate or providence had arranged for her to miss that stage, allowing her to find her true destination in the heart of a cowboy whose horse carried 2.